Welcome to Conversate, our podcast where we engage in conversation. And on this week's episode, Aaron and Kevin are talking about when the angel Gabriel came to Mary in Luke chapter 1, verses 26 through 38. And just unpacking a variety of different things that angel says to Mary. We spend a bit of time talking about shadows and light and that metaphor, but also what that means for us as we live in this world, often in what feels like shadows, wondering if there really is any light. And so we'll get into that and find hope in Jesus, as always. So our goal in this podcast is that you will hear us in conversation and you'll go start another spiritual conversation with somebody else. As always, we hope you enjoy it. Yo, Kevin.
Morning, sir. Dude, I'm admiring this mug. I've never used this one.
Did you find that in the kitchen?
It's the biggest one I could find in there. It's huge.
What is it?
It's Isle Royale National Park. Hey, if this is your mug, listener, thanks for leaving it here. Just so you know, we only don't use mugs that have people's names on them.
Right.
So if you have a name on your mug, you're safe.
Right. Most of the time.
But no, this one's great. It's like a map. It's got a moose and a gray wolf on the inside and the outside.
You ever been to Isle Royale?
No.
You got plans to go?
Not like, you know, when you really make plans to do something.
Yeah.
No, I don't have those.
Yeah.
But I do have like the generic, you know, sort of floating around in my head plan.
Yeah.
It'd be awesome.
Yeah.
It'd be awesome to go see. I've heard really good things about it.
Yeah. I still haven't been, unfortunately. Someday.
I wish
that's going to happen.
I wish I could remember the there's a place you can go in Isle Royale where you can stand on the biggest island in the biggest lake of the biggest island of the biggest lake. I don't know how many iterations of that.
Yeah, and then there's a rock, you know,
exactly.
That's got a little dent in it and a speck of sand.
I did find that amusing.
Yeah. That does exist, though.
Yeah.
An island in a lake on an island in a lake.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's fun.
Yeah. But alas,
here we are on the mainland.
That's right. Just trying to survive the elements here, man.
Yeah.
It hasn't been that hard.
No. Some modern conveniences.
Yeah.
Make it kind of easy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's been wintry though. We're excited.
Yeah.
At least I am in my family.
Dude,
so
same. I love it.
we like the snow, and we're itching to go skiing. So that's the thing. Downhill.
They open up this week, right?
Yeah. On Friday.
Yeah.
So here we go.
I mean, honestly, like, I'd be happy with more snow, you know?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, like, what we've gotten so far is just the tip of the iceberg, I hope.
I hope too.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I could do with less of the wet stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you told a story in your sermon?
I did.
Or I don't know if it was a story. It was a list of things that could go wrong in somebody's life in one day. Was that real experiences?
No, it wasn't. I almost clarified in the sermon.
Yeah.
Like when I was preparing, I was like, should I let people know so they don't like feel really bad for me? I was like, nah, that's fine. They can feel really bad for me. No, I'm trying to think. I have certainly... The part about blasting through your driveway.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I know that you've done that.
Yeah,
but you also mentioned your snowblower breaking, and then I was going to ask you, shoot, did your snowblower break?
I would be so sad if that happened. No, the snowblower's great, man.
Okay.
Fires up every time.
Good.
Take it for granted.
Yeah.
Every day. No, it's really wonderful. But talking about modern conveniences, man, that sure makes getting around up here way easier.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But no, so far. Oh, go ahead.
Have I told you the story about when I spilled coffee on my white shirt?
Yes.
Is that where you got that from?
Well, I didn't like deliberately think of it, but I gotta believe that was there, you know, like hovering around.
I gotta tell the story. So,
please.
So years ago, there was a funeral that was going to take place at church, and so I got here early, and I even left my house early, and I stopped by the co-op. Excuse me, and I got like some little breakfast something, and I wanted to get coffee, but I don't know. My wife at that time was drinking these like chocolate, like mocha coffee thing with coconut milk in it and stuff. I even forget what it's called now.
Rebel.
Rebel. That's what it was. And they come in the cooler and stuff. And I had never tried one. And I was like, that actually sounds good. So I got one of these. So then I get to my office, and I think I had a muffin or something, and then this coffee drink. But you take the cap off of you screw the cap off this plastic bottle thing, and then it looked to me like there was more plastic like on the top, like another layer of something. And I'm like, how do you peel this off? So I'm like poking at it and stuff, and then I poked really hard, and I realized it was like hardened up coconut milk on the top, and it splashed in, and then some chocolate coffee drink splashed all over my desk, and I was like, oh man, what a mess. It may have gotten on my pants a little bit at that point, and then I was kind of bummed. But then I looked on the outside of the container, and it says shake well, and I'm like, whatever, I don't ever shake these things. But then it said, no, seriously, like more than you think you should. Like it did.
Like actually there.
I was like, oh man,
these guys mean business.
So I had plopped this like coconut milk plug down into the stuff, and then I'm like shaking it. Well, so then I'm like doing some work on my computer, and then I had a nice white button up shirt on, and I was taking sips of this stuff, and it was good. And then I went to like take the final sip of it, and was tipping my head back, and then that chunk of coconut milk must not have ever like fully dissolved, because it came flying from the bottom of the bottle to my mouth, which then shot a bunch of like chocolate coffee all over my mouth and down the front of my shirt and stuff. And we had so nobody was here yet, but except our office manager, Judy, at the time was here.
Shout out, Judy.
Yeah, shout out. So she, I went out and showed her, and she goes, oh my goodness. And I was like, I don't know what to do. She goes, let me take your shirt. And she went into the bathroom and was like cleaning it off and stuff. And then I just had like a white t-shirt on in my office. And then it's like getting close to the time that the family was going to be arriving to meet with me prior to the service. And so I was in my office, and then I heard this knock on my door. And I thought it was Judy with my shirt. So I go over and rush to open the door, and it's actually like the grieving spouse and family saying like, are you ready to meet? And I'm there just in this tight white old t-shirt, and I'm like, not yet. Just a minute. I'll be with you in just a minute. So then they walk away, and it wasn't 30 seconds later that there was another knock on my door, and it was Judy with my shirt, and she had mostly got it all cleaned off. And then I told her she was 30 seconds too late. So anyways. So if that was the inspiration for your coffee down the shirt story, you're welcome. If not, thanks, I'm sure it's happened to other people.
I'm sure it has. I honestly don't remember it. I'm sure it's happened to me, which is weird to think about, like missing a cup to your own lips, you feel like be able to do that. But dude, half the time, not half the time.
It happens a lot.
Oh yeah. Like you ever do that thing where you're like, you got a cup in one hand and like a fork in the other, or like you forget what's in which hand, and like you go to bite, the fork, and there's no food on it, or you try to drink the fork or bite the cup. You ever do that?
No. No, that sounds like a you
thing. It's a personal problem. But yeah,
life doesn't go our way sometimes.
No, I mean
maybe most of the time.
That's what we always laugh. So I only said it in one of the services that I didn't intend to say, but because at one point I was talking about the difference between being a child and a parent, and part of that's like having authority as the parent. Like you get to make the rules, you get to make the plans, right? Your kids are accountable to you. You hold them accountable. I mentioned that my daughter likes to imagine that when she becomes an adult, she can have everything go the way she wants it to. I'm like, not exactly that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you understand from a kid's perspective, it seems like you have all the control, but now we know there's lots of things we wish would go different or better or not happen at all. But this is life, man.
That's for sure.
This is life.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you were kind of leaning into this idea, right? In the preaching on Luke 1 verses 26 through 38.
Yep.
Where the angel Gabriel comes to Mary, right? And the angel says the what is it, the power of the Most High will overshadow you.
That's right. Yep.
Yeah. So let's say, I don't know, not to re-preach the sermon, but this is an interesting concept to think about. I hadn't really maybe pondered this in my heart before, at least in what that word means. So
yeah,
do you want to just, I don't know, briefly describe that? This idea of the overshadowing.
Well, and I'll say this, like, I don't think that the Greek term and the context even, right, for Mary or for the disciples necessarily has negative implications, right? It is kind of a strange word. I mean, it does mean literally. So I mentioned 4 of the 5 times it shows up. It shows up at this announcement of the angel Gabriel to Mary. The power of the Most High will overshadow you. It shows up in 3 of the Gospels, each time talking about the cloud that enveloped or overshadowed the disciples when they saw Jesus manifest his glory on the Mount of Transfiguration. And the 5th time is in the book of Acts, actually, when we hear that people were even trying to basically like get close enough to the Apostle Peter that his shadow would fall on them and they be healed.
Yeah, that's right.
So each time it does connote a shadow, like being shadowed, or kind of even the pictures of, which you kind of went this direction in the prayer of the day, but this idea of like clouds blocking the sun and you're in the shade or the shadow.
Yeah.
But the connotation isn't necessarily negative in the scriptures, right? I mean, honestly, really for all 5, there's some pretty significant positive ramifications, right? One's in the shade of Peter to get healing. The disciples are, yes, they're enveloped by this cloud, and there is a measure of fear and uncertainty. I mean, for them as Jews, right, being on this mountain that's overshadowed by a cloud and hearing the voice of God, that's evoking very strong Mount Sinai senses. And on Mount Sinai, like all the people were terrified out of their mind. They're like, God, don't talk to us anymore. Like, this is too frightening. And even in the Transfiguration stories, I believe, when that episode ends, the disciples they're like face down. And Jesus actually like raises them up. Kind of a cool picture. So here for Mary, it's not as if, it's like this big dark shadows being cast, over the whole of her life by being the mother of Jesus. In fact, the angel really speaks to the contrary. Greetings, O highly favored one. You found favor with God. Yeah. By the way, this son's going to be the fulfillment of all the hopes, of your people, of that Messiah to come. He's actually going to be the Son of God. So it's a very positive announcement, and yet, and this is kind of what I wanted to lean into, both in the life of Mary and in the life of God's people today, there is a certain shadow, right, that we experience. There's a shadow in the sense of, all humankind experiences suffering. This is universal. But even as God's followers, there's a particular kind of shadow that can fall on us in our walk. Maybe sometimes because of particular expectations we have for being Christians, as if like we're going to sort of have, a shield around us, if you will, that just absolutely defends and blocks and negates anything bad or anything significantly bad occurring in our life. Or the sort of shadow that follows us because of the concerted effort of the devil and the spirits of darkness, because we don't... there is perhaps more motivation for the devil and the spirits of darkness to be about breaking down the lives of Christians, right? Their homes, their lives, their faith, because for those who aren't belonging to the people of God, they don't really have to focus all that much attention right that way. Now that's getting into that spiritual realm. That's that whole realm is kind of interesting to think about and to discuss. And there's biblical precedent for it, but like there's no verse that says, as far as I'm aware, Satan's targeting you, right? As Christians.
I mean, the devil prowls around like a roaring lion seeking to devour you.
Right, exactly. So, and I would say because that was written to Christians, you know, it wasn't some treatise that was written to the whole world.
Right.
That's why I would make the case for that, right? Like as Christians, you really do have, if you will, like a mark on your back, a target on your back for Satan, for the spirits of darkness, which is why it can be so challenging, or it can feel so shadowed sometimes as a follower of Christ, because it's like, you know, it's a bummer enough, you know, when like you're just doing whatever you want to do in your existence and things don't go the way you want them to, you know? I mean, that's frustrating. But it's a different kind of a bummer when you're actively trying to crucify your flesh, you know, or die to yourself and live for other people, you know, do what's good and right for others, even ahead of yourself, and then to get attacked, you know, that's, there's, I think, an enhanced frustration there, I would think.
Yeah.
So that's kind of...
No, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
The metaphor is interesting of like, of shadows. In that, like, you know, I think we, in the movies and that kind of stuff, we associate, you know, those operating in the shadows as the, you know, the bad stuff, right?
The villains.
Yeah. They operate in the shadows, or I think I've even heard that talked about with, even like special forces operators, you know, like
sure, people who have a target they're trying to take out.
Yeah, but you don't see them. They operate in the shadow. So so usually shadows kind of conjures up like negativity and stuff. However, shade is often seen as like a positive thing on a hot day,
especially for people who live in the desert.
Right. And so, and what is shade? It's a shadow.
That's right.
You know, and so I think that you know, they're, I don't know, metaphorically, I'm just playing with metaphorical language, but like, you know, light and shadows is the fact that like, in our experience, none of us can actually fully stand like truly in the light of God's presence, you know, in our sinful state. Like that's what we see in the scriptures, is that like people that are in the presence of God, like, you know, even have to veil their faces and stuff. Like it's almost too much, right? The holiness of God. And so much of our experience is life in the shadows. But that shadow is produced, you know, by the light.
Right. You don't have shadows without light.
Right.
Yeah.
And so shadows don't, I guess what I'm saying is they don't have to conjure up a negativity, but it is experientially our experience in this life is that it's not fully lit.
Right. Yeah. Right. There's still something about like if you're in the darkness, whether you want to say this literally or metaphorically, right? So like for a child that's in the darkness.
Right.
I'm William. I mean, every night, like when I turn out the lamp, you know, when it's time for bed, and we have a second lamp that's much more dim, that's still on. But I turn out that much brighter one, and immediately it's like too dark, too dark. You know.
Yeah, we have played that game.
But also, you know, like say there's whisperers going around, but we're not in the know, we're in the dark. That also conjures up, like there's a fear associated there because we kind of like to know, or know what's going on.
Right.
We don't like to be in the dark.
And you just also can't see as clearly.
Yes.
In the shadows either. Last night I was trying to match up kids' socks by light of the Christmas tree alone. And some of the stripes, you know, one of them's navy blue, one of them's black. I can hardly tell the difference in broad daylight, you know. And I'm like holding them up to my face, you know. You just can't, you know. And when it's not bright, it's hard to see clearly, right? I mean, it's that simple.
And right.
And I think that's, you know, experientially what a lot of us deal with, and I mean, I'm just, looking out the window here today, and it's gloomy. Like the sky's white. It's not snowing. It's just kind of, I don't know. Yeah. Blah.
Yeah.
Right.
Uh-huh.
And it's kind of fascinating because it's like, well, if those clouds weren't there, it'd be a bright, sunny, blue sky day. Mm-hmm. Right. And then, there was a counselor that you and I both know well, Bruce Hartung. He was a professor at the seminary when I was there. I think he's been a friend to you as well. And I remember he came to present to a group of pastors, a small group of us, and we spent the weekend together. And I remember him asking me this question, like. I think he asked the general question, like, how are things going, and I was like, good, I don't know. He's like, are there any clouds? I don't know. He's got this way of like getting you to be introspective. And I was like, clouds? And he's like, yeah, what are the clouds in life? And I was like, I don't know. I hadn't really, I'm not a, I mean, on an optimism to pessimism scale, if that's a spectrum, I'll tend towards optimism. I'm not a down in the dumps kind of guy. Maybe sometimes to a fault, because I don't know. I don't want to deal with that stuff. So I'll just swing it the other way. But I choose not to dwell there. But yeah, it was just an interesting way to phrase the question that got me thinking differently. And just that it helps me, as you mentioned, like in our prayers on Sunday, in this idea of like the shadows, like that's kind of how I see the days. And I've used this metaphor with people before, where it's like, yeah, some days are cloudy, some days are blah, and it's like, but the sun is, I mean, imagine it's a blue sky day, like the sun is that bright right now. Like, I mean, I know this even in the summertime, like you go to the beach on a cloudy day and you think like, I don't need to wear sunscreen today. Well, you can still get burned.
Yeah, that's right.
So the sun
more
is
of a danger.
Yeah, so the sun is it's still there. Like, and so Jesus and the light that he shines into our lives is full sun. I mean, it's always there. He's right. always present.
Yes. His promises don't go away because you're experiencing the shadow. Right. And that's a huge.
And sometimes, like, just metaphorically, some of those shadows, like they're long casting shadows, like if you're in the shadow of a giant tree or a skyscraper, it's like, man, it feels like I can't get out of this shadow. Right. And so sometimes experientially that's the thing. Right. But yeah, the light is always shining.
And that's where, like I didn't really unpack this at all in the sermon. I mean, I mentioned it at the very end, but there is this idea that here talked about like with relative frequency, which is this idea of the shadow of the cross. Yeah. Like I've never really understood that phrase, what does that mean? What does it mean to, there's an old hymn I know that talks about having peace and rest because we're in the shadow of the cross, and the best sense that I could make of it, I'd be curious to hear, like, if you have familiarity with that or have heard any explanations or drawn your own conclusions. But it's this idea, like the cross in the scriptures, and when Jesus talks about, taking up our own cross or having crosses to bear, right? The cross is sort of this image of challenge or difficulty that we face, at least in Jesus' case, that you face unjustly in Jesus' case, right? It's something that you're bearing for the sake of other people, maybe even connected to their own weakness or sinfulness. Certainly in Jesus' case, again. So again, like this idea of the cross is suffering, right? But being in the shadow of the cross, I guess like the way I understand that phrase is meaning, yes, you experience shadow. Yes, there is suffering, but no one's suffering is meaningless. Especially for the Christian, your suffering is not meaningless because it's the place where Jesus has climactically connected himself to you, right? Like he went to the cross for you. And so that's like that idea of the promise that's holding, the sun that's shining even behind the clouds. You're experiencing shade right now or shadow. Yeah, you might be, but do not forget that like the light, the sun, that's the resurrection, that's the glorious hope. That's not what I'm experiencing in this season or in this moment, but I can understand what I'm experiencing because of Jesus going to the cross, right? Like I don't know if it makes sense of our suffering, but see, this is my attempts to, this is probably what I didn't talk about on Sunday. I'm still kind of unpacking it for myself, but I don't know. Have you heard that phrase before? The shadow of the cross?
Well, yeah. And I know you like the song by, David Crowder.
Threw it in the email today.
Yeah, I know.
Well, so that song, this is a small anecdote, but I actually first learned that song when I worked at Cape Luther. Oh. So I worked there one summer in 2013, and they do a skit as a staff during, like each week they'd have like a talent show, basically a variety show. And, but the staff always puts on like some sort of production that's thematic and sort of tells like the gospel story. Okay. And so ours was to that song. So whether we had little vignettes during the song of like life going awry and, you know, arguments and fighting and all this tension and stuff. And then there was one of the camp counselors, my friend Prime, who was selected to be Jesus. I was jealous of him, but he made a great Jesus. But he gets like pummeled and stuff like during the song. Like we reenacted the crucifixion. But anyways, it was all set to that song. So that's how I came to know that song. And that song means more to me now, I think, than it did then. But it was very powerful to me at the time. Yeah,
I mean, because the last line of the chorus, you know, when all seems lost and I'm thrown and I'm tossed, I'm resting in the shadow of the cross.
Yeah, so what does that mean?
Well, and I think it's, you know, I mean, the shadow is not the real thing either. It's
created because of the existence of something else.
Yeah. So it's not, so you get the benefits of the cross without having to go to the cross literally yourself, you know, so you get the benefits of the
that almost like feels or has the flavors, I think, of that idea of shade.
I think so.
That the cross becomes sort of this covering for you, like no matter, and maybe that's part of it, right? No matter what you're experiencing, you know, that whether it's because of your own sinfulness or brokenness or someone else's or just the general brokenness of the world, Jesus is doing something about that by going to the cross.
Right. And the heaviest burden that you deserve to carry, you don't have to carry. Right? The greatest suffering that you deserve, you don't have to endure. Like it's all taken upon Jesus there on the cross. So you get all the benefits of his suffering and death for you, and for you that means rest, you know. So I don't know, that's how I see that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So like really in that shade motif, protection, rest. Yeah. Receiving the goodness from this thing that is, I suppose, like the idea of shade too is like, you know, the tree or whatever object is shielding you from what would otherwise, you know, sort of be your undoing, right? Scorching heat or whatever. And just like the cross shields us from what would be, that's what you're saying. Yeah. Like our burden to bear, right? Which is our guilt before God.
Yeah. As sinners, right? Yeah. We can't stand the fullness of the light, you know?
Yeah.
Get sunburnt and more.
Right.
So, but in the shadow of the cross, we stand, you know, God sees us through the lens of his son, Jesus. And so we get to stand in that presence of God in light of what Christ has accomplished for us. So, yeah. But also, there's much more in Luke chapter 1 in those verses as well, that, you know, that you were attempting to unpack in the sermon. There's a lot there. Because the angel comes to Mary, right? And I mean, it's just, it's fascinating, you know, favored one, right? It's like, well, what what did this 15-year-old girl do to be favored? You know, I suppose it depends on what denomination of Christianity
your theology of Mary.
Yeah, you belong to.
What would you say, Aaron? What would you say?
I would say she's favored because God favored her.
Yeah, he just chose to do it. Yeah, I would agree.
Just like in 1 John, you know, beloved, let us love one another, for love comes from God. Or I'm quoting the wrong part of 1 John. It's, you know, oh my goodness. What kind of love the Father has lavished upon us that we should be called children of God. For that is what we are.
Yeah, and similarly, right? This is love, not that we have loved God, but God loved us. Yeah. So yeah,
and so you're beloved because God loves you. You know, she's favored because God favored her. Not of her own merit.
That's right. Yeah. We don't imagine that Mary somehow earned special status with God, and therefore he chose to select her. Right. Or even,
well, and go ahead. Because I mean, you broke it down with that Greek word charis, in the ways that showed up, and I hadn't broken it down into the Greek, but all the variants of that word charis, which is also the word for grace.
Yes.
Which grace is by definition gift.
Yes. So, unmerited.
Yeah. So all those things are God's gift, you know.
Which helps explain too her response, right? Like if she thought she'd done all this stuff for God, it's sort of like, about time.
Yeah, right.
Wow, finally, you know, I've been doing all this stuff for you.
You would think if anybody earned it, it should be Elizabeth, who was, you know, barren all those years. Right?
Yeah. Well, that's interesting because even the text in Luke 1 describes Zechariah and Elizabeth as these godly, righteous, blameless before God.
Yeah.
You know, and it's important to understand too. Again, that doesn't mean they never sinned. That's not what blameless means. But like living under the Old Testament law, I mean, at least my sense of it would be they believed and trusted in God's word that the sacrifices that they went and took part in and made bore forgiveness for them. Yeah. They were forgiven because of God's word, and they trusted in that.
Right.
But it's just interesting that, like, we get that description for that couple. We don't get anything like that for Mary.
Right.
I mean, and it's not to say that she didn't go to Jerusalem and make the sacrifices, you know. In fact, in chapter 2, I suppose we'll see them doing just that.
Yeah, as a young poor couple.
That's right.
Who can't even afford the full sacrifices.
That's right. But all that to say, just like with us, God has favor on you and on me, and you don't have to earn it. It's a gift. Yeah. An overabundant grace upon grace. There in Luke 1.
Yeah. But then also the naming of Jesus, right? So Gabriel is out here, you know, naming babies to be born.
That's right. Yeah.
John, right? And John, the name of John means God has been gracious. Yahweh's been gracious. And the name Jesus means Yahweh will save his people from their sins. Right? And so that name also, that's the Greek version of the Hebrew name of Joshua, Yeshua. So like people would have known, they know this name. They know what's
sure
built into it. And so,
thinking of pricking up like Jewish ears. Yeah.
Well, that wasn't in Luke though, right? Where it says he'll save his people from their sins. That's in Matthew.
That must be in Matthew, I think. Because I don't believe it gave us the description in Luke 1 there. It did say his name will be Jesus. Yeah. But then I think it goes on to say he'll be the son of the Most High.
That's in Matthew, and the angel goes to Joseph.
Huh.
Well, there you go.
These Christmas narratives, man.
Yeah, they
all kind of form into one. But no, to your point though about the name of Jesus, that would ring for sure in the ears of Jewish people. You know, Yeshua. I mean, Joshua is a significant character, you know, of conquest. Yeah. You know, of
defeating the enemies.
That's right. Taking them down, storming the gates. Yeah. And Jesus is going to do that in a very different way, though.
Bring you into the promised land.
Amen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Huh. Well, I'll be interested to see how you unpack it on Wednesday. We get to dabble in Luke 1, 26 to 38 a little more
tonight.
Yeah.
Tonight.
That's right.
It's coming tonight.
That's right.
If you're listening to this
on release day.
On release day. you're listening to it in the year 3000.
Does the sun still exist? Have we landed there yet? Is that possible?
All right. Hey, peace, brother.
Peace, brother.